West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
All right, new tonight. Media outlets and news organizations, including this one, NBC News, are now demanding that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy give them the same access to the 44,000 hours of January 6 footage that he gave to Fox host Tucker Carlson. Laura Handman, the lawyer representing these outlets, said in a letter to McCarthy, quote, "There is no basis for further delaying granting this access to these news organizations or any other media outlets that make similar requests." Kevin McCarthy gave exclusive access of this footage to Tucker Carlson, who spent the last 2 years downplaying the events of January 6, calling the insurrection a, quote, nonviolent election justice protest. He even produced a documentary suggesting the day's events were a false flag operation. But this goes beyond just conspiracies. There's real concern that Capitol security could be compromised if certain secure locations, including evacuation routes, are improperly released to the public. Here's what Congressman Jamie Raskin, a member of the January 6th committee, told my colleague Stephanie Ruhle.
We have security concerns about turning over the location of security cameras in the U.S. Capitol that the police use. We have concern about the escape and evacuation routes that were used on that day. We don't want to just throw our hands up and say, well, let's just let everything go and let the insurrectionists have the material that will allow them to plan the next January 6th.
Here's one hypothesis why Kevin McCarthy gave the footage to Carlson and only Carlson. This was, in effect, an olive branch to one of his most high-profile skeptics. McCarthy's trying to appease the far-right wing of his party, this time by effectively outsourcing a bid to reinvestigate the riot to his favorite cable news commentator. Because Kevin McCarthy, despite being Speaker, is not the real power broker for a group of House Republicans. Remember, this is the same McCarthy who suffered through 15 humiliating rounds of voting before being elected Speaker, and he only succeeded once he made concessions to the far right of his party. McCarthy became beholden to the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan and was forced to reward them with key committee assignments and more in exchange for their votes. It is easy to see how this deal with Carlson is a similar effort to win over a former critic. Kevin McCarthy has been Speaker for a little over a month, and he's already given away so much power. You have to wonder if he still has, or if he ever had, any real power of his own. This is the point where we'd normally laugh at Kevin McCarthy and kind of joke. But it's hard to laugh when McCarthy has deliberately and recklessly put people's lives in danger. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez of California. He is a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, it's great to have you back on the show. Good to see you. Why do you think Kevin McCarthy is giving this footage only to Tucker Carlson and the folks at Fox?
I want everyone to be very clear what Kevin McCarthy and the extreme MAGA Republicans are trying to do. They're trying to rewrite the history of the last 2 years and of the Trump era so that they can have a different political narrative going into 2024 and win a larger majority. They do that on the House Oversight Committee, which I'm on, by having these cockamamie types of investigations that everybody knows are based on conspiracy theories. Now he's handing over these tapes to Tucker Carlson so that Tucker can cherry pick the footage that he deems necessary to use the Fox megaphone to basically say that January 6th was no big deal. It's much ado about nothing. And it was only because the Democrats and the liberal media are trying to manipulate you believing that the Republicans were involved in an insurrection that almost toppled our democracy. So what they're trying to do is pass the buck in order to gain more viewers and voters going into 2024.
You have both leaders, Hakeem Jeffries in the House, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, condemning the move. Schumer says that the release of the footage would, quote, compromise the safety of the legislative branch. Do you agree with that assessment? How do you see the safety being compromised?
As somebody who was in the Capitol on January 6th, who was one of the last 20 to 25 members who got evacuated by the Capitol Police when we had insurrectionists beating on the gallery doors. We know that every nook and cranny of that Capitol was actually a security advantage that we had because they didn't know where they were going. And that's what allowed us to escape and made sure that nobody lost their lives out of members of Congress. It didn't stop the fact that police officers lost their life. But imagine if they actually knew where they were going, what they were doing. Things could have been a lot worse. So yes, I'm concerned that this footage has information that will allow insurrectionists and another January 6th to occur. And also, does that mean that foreign adversaries, people that want to cause us harm, could they use that footage? We don't know yet because we don't know exactly what the contents of that footage entails. And that's why I'm supporting Hakeem Jeffries and getting more information to ensure that the safety and security of the people in the Capitol are maintained.
How desperate is Kevin McCarthy in all of this? I mean, what does it say that he is beholden to figures like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Oh, it shows that he's a figurehead in name only. He might be the head, but Marjorie Taylor Greene is the neck that turns the head. It is that extreme wing of the party that is putting the American people in danger. And remember, some of the things that she said this past week even go to the core of what it means to be the United States of America. So we're in a terrible place. We need to make sure that we push back and we don't allow them to change the narrative of the last couple of years.
Speaking of Greene, I'm sure you saw the news this week. She is defending her push for a national divorce between blue and red states, saying the country is moving towards another civil war. I remember you pushed for Greene to be stripped of her committee assignments in the last Congress. I just want your reaction to having a sitting member of Congress openly calling for the dissolution and dissolving of the United States of America.
I find it personally offensive. Somebody who I believe in this country wholeheartedly. I believe in our institutions, and I believe that our differences are settled at the ballot box and in the legislative and political process, not through the dissolution of our great country. And let's remember that that she is not only the neck that turns the head, but she is also oftentimes at the forefront of what is being spoken and talked about in the dark recesses of the extreme MAGA Republican sphere. And so is she now somebody who spread the big lie in 2020? Is this something else that she's pushing? And I want to be very clear why this is dangerous, because the same people that believe the big lie will probably be the same people that start repeating this dangerous rhetoric that there should be a national divorce or a secession of states from the union. And that would be a terrible, terrible mistake.
Let me switch gears for a moment. You recently launched the Congressional Dads Caucus to focus on policies for working families. In fact, you even brought your 5-month-old son to the House floor during that whole Speaker vote fiasco. I hope he did well there, because that thing dragged on a lot longer than a lot of people had anticipated. Tell us about that caucus and what you hope to achieve for working families in this country.
Yeah, the Dads Caucus, I just realized we wanted to take advantage of all the attention that we got because the fact that I brought my son to the House floor. I got praise for something that women would often get criticized for, just taking care of their own child. But we can hopefully call attention to that double standard, and then hopefully gain more support for policies that support working families, everything from affordable child care to the child tax credit to paid family leave. As somebody who had parents that worked 4 to 5 jobs a week to make ends meet, when I got sick with pneumonia and almost bankrupted my family because my parents had to miss shifts at work in order to take care of me, I know that these policies can uplift families. And if we want to talk about family values, we want to talk about supporting families across the country, these are the policies that we need to get behind. So I'm proud to be a founder of the Dads Caucus, but we want to make sure that we actually get some real legislative wins.
Some beautiful moments there. I see him already getting a taste of American political life. And I got to say, Congressman, I'm super impressed by the way that you were able to wrap that harness around it to keep him there on your chest. As a father, I always struggled. I didn't have the coordination to pull that off. So.
Well, some people actually said that I had it a little wrong on the footage.
Oh, really?
So
Okay,
I've learned since then, and I've done it better. So I don't want you to get called out for
he looks like he's
way.
enjoying himself there. Congressman Jimmy Gomez of California, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Greatly appreciate your time.
It is Monday, the 27th of February of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Oh my, how are you? I was noticing that when I was putting up some specific diaries on Daily Codes to announce that a podcast is available on Spreaker, I don't really have a tagline for Mondays that I can add. I usually just mention that River City Hash Mondays is essentially named that because when you make hash on Mondays, it's from everything that's left over from the weekend. What kind of tagline is that? So I'll have to think of something to put in for the tagline part of that diary. Just, we do these things to sort of spice it up for people. But anyway, how are you? It was another one of those weekends, wasn't it? Had a little bit of weather, and we're having a bit of weather as we speak at the very moment. At this very moment. But we'll get into these moments later on during the weather part of the salon here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But looks like Marjorie Taylor Greene is still on this national divorce. This morning she was tweeting about it once again, taking the temperature of America. Oh my God. That's all we need. I don't know. Just, several years ago, she was just some crazy-ass rich lady in Georgia whose dad bought her a gym. Here, have some fun. Run this gym. That's what she did. And I got to tell you, she does this CrossFit pull-up routine that just as a guy who has, some bad shoulders from being a jock, I would never suggest people do that kind of an exercise. Oh my God. But anyway, regardless of that, she's easy and should be mocked. But I also have to acknowledge once again that just a few years ago, she was a nobody. And when I say a nobody, I mean just some rich white Karen in Georgia. Racist as can be and filled with the most conspiracy-addled conspiracies that can only be had from sitting around the table with other like-minded ladies, ruminating about the events of the day. So, for some reason, I guess because of her small circle of friends, she thinks the temperature of America is calling for a Nazi takeover of the United States of America, and it will not happen, biatch. And the feckless lack of leadership of a Kevin McCarthy allowed all of this, and we know it. So, I remember a time that you couldn't really just come out and say, we're on the side of the Viet Cong. You couldn't say that. Especially if you were an elected official of any level. If you were a dog catcher and elected, you couldn't say, I'm on the side of the Viet Cong in this war. It was untoward. Oh, yeah, maybe you have a constitutional First Amendment right to say it. But when you were taking the side of the enemy, and I got to tell you, they were the enemy. Not nice. It was, you just didn't do that. Look how far we've come, and especially with the pro-war. Oh, they're all peaceniks now. Trust me. They're wanting a Sudetenland land, and they have all the guns. Oh, yeah, we're all for peace because we got the guns. Sure. They know where their white utopia is, and they know where their income is derived. Is it any wonder that Russia has a worse GDP than Italy? You don't get that way, being a Russia without, being kind of a mob state. And that's what they want here, another mob state. Great. We have a story about Ellen and Scott Adams, so I won't get into that brouhaha because we'll just let the reportage speak for itself in that instance. But let me just say that just because one has amassed, by whatever way possible, being born into it with a leg up and then increasing that wealth, these people who do this, by and large, seem to have like a God complex. And I don't mean a complex that they're fearful of God. They think they are God. And it gets very tiresome, I have to admit. And I only mention this because when one becomes self-aware, maybe running around with a God complex is not the best way to, well, shall we say, be neighborly. Be a good boss. Sure, I might have had a bit of a God complex, a know-it-all, flexing my leadership muscles to prove that I was a leader. You learn quick. If you have any seriousness about, interspecies behavior. Is that right? Getting along with people, having social skills. Being a good neighbor, once again. What's wrong with that? Remember when they said PC? Oh, PC. Well, I'm not going to be politically correct. Oh, you politically correct liberals. Politically correct. PC. It was a pejorative. Remember that? And all that being politically correct meant was just, being a good neighbor. You can't make me be a good neighbor. Wow. Are you an American or are you not? How How dare you say I'm not an American? Are you saying I'm not an American? Yeah, I'm just asking. Sure sounds like you're not an American if you don't want to be a good neighbor. I thought that was one of the virtues of being an American, is that you were a good neighbor. Well, one could only say that if they never felt the sting of being murdered by a white mob. Mm-hmm. America is racist against white people. Always has been, apparently. Don't tell anyone. You might get canceled. Yeah, well, too bad. You need to be. Oh, how about that Nazi Day of Rage? Let's go rage against the Jews. Didn't turn out as a large event as they had hoped. I think because we were on to their game. The danger still exists. Because I got to tell you, in America, every day is Punch a Nazi Day. That's why we are Americans, and that's why Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to divorce the United States between red and blue. You know, she put out some sort of tweet. Now, I'm not sure it was actually her tweet, so I didn't retweet it. You know, it was screenshotted and stuff, so I didn't go to her page to look for it because, to be honest, I just did not want to waste the time. But she was going off about the history of dinosaurs and that the word dinosaur is like a very recent made up thing. It was just made up. And before that, we called them dragons. Really, I know. Kraken, too, I suppose. I don't know. Kraken could have been a dinosaur squid. Could have been. And we have dragons now in the ocean, she says. Okay. That's sitting around the table eating a few or drinking a few too many. I don't know. Is she a Merlot drinker? I don't know. I kind of think she's probably slamming something a little bit harder with the gals in the hood. Yeah, well, I've seen her place. It's more like a compound. All right. You know, the Nazis had a preponderance of an obsession about fitness. Let's put it that way. The Nazi youth, you know, Nazi Jungen, and the German ladies guild, young ladies, they all worked out. And, you know, it was because they were Aryans, you know. They had to be fit. You looked at some of the Burgermeisters and you're thinking, wow, I don't know. Maybe because they've been drinking beer every day in the morning since they were 12. You turn out like that. But the Nazis, by and large, especially when they were indoctrinating the youth, had an obsession about fitness. And I always wondered about the fitness craze in America. Now, that's not to denigrate John Kennedy's Presidential Council on Fitness, which I think was a very good thing. But I'm talking about the obsessive working out, the I don't know, display of, you know, your body. I don't know. There was just something creepy about it to me. Especially when it became so commercialized and whatnot. Now, I went to the gym, but I got to admit, when I was going to the gym, it was back during the days of excess. So when you went to the gym, you just didn't go to, like, lift some weights. And if you were lucky that there was a dry heat sauna that you could sit in, you know. So, but I would work out at the Y in Berkeley, but this was long. When I was working out at the Y at Berkeley, that was long after my disdain to these mall-sized gyms that were sprouting up, at least in Southern California. I was a member of one in Buena Park. Had a bowling alley, bars, like it was a mall. Had like clothing boutiques all over the place. For shoes too and whatnot. Gloves, you got to have weightlifting gloves. But yeah, I mean, it was a whole mall experience. You worked out and had a cocktail after. I'm like, I don't know. The Germanic part of me says that maybe, I don't know. This is kind of weird. But every single one of those people, I got to tell you, would go to Huntington Beach to make sure that the gays don't take over. I'm all right, looks pretty homoerotic to me around here. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Okay, well, deny your being and repress yourself, and the repression manifests into, well, bad behavior. Self-loathing and self-hate. Lashing out. It's a common psychological behavior tick that should be avoided. If not, cured, we're never allowed to rise to begin with. Anyway. Oh, why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store, as I have been alluding to quite a bit here in this elongated screed on a Monday morning. Well, yes, security and safety concerns continue to be raised over McCarthy giving Carlson that exclusive January 6th footage. What is Carlson going to do with that? We know. On the rest of the menu, millions who rely on Medicaid are under threat of being booted from the program this year. So we got a little rundown about what you can do to avoid that, or what to do if you're on the list. Several Democratic-led states seek to bolster voter protections, and that's good. And apartheid blood emerald heir Elon Musk says Scott Adams being canceled is proof the U.S. media is racist against white people. You would expect an apartheid blood emerald heir to come up with that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where hundreds of protesters denounced racism in Tunisia. And tens of thousands of Israelis protested the far-right government's plans to overhaul the legal system, coming to an America near you. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across from that chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And thank you to our recent Patreons who have become recurring Patreons at Up Netroots Radio. Your recurring patronage really helps us pay our bills, and thank you for becoming those recent Patreons. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on the same Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where you can find the actual reportage of these articles that we have been referencing and sometimes just riffing off of. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is by Amanda Seitz out of the Associated Press. If you get health coverage through Medicaid, you might be at risk of losing that coverage over the next year. Roughly 84 million people are covered by the government-sponsored program, which has grown by 20 million people since January of 2020, just before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. But as states begin checking everyone's eligibility for Medicaid for the first time in 3 years, as many as 14 million people could lose access to that health care coverage. I'll look at why so many people may no longer qualify for the Medicaid program over the next year, and what you need to know if you're one of those people who relies on the program is listed below. And here we go. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the federal government prohibited states from kicking people off Medicaid, even if they were no longer eligible. Before the pandemic, people would regularly lose their Medicaid coverage if they started making too much money to qualify for the program, gained health care coverage through their employer, or moved into a new state. That all stopped once COVID-19 started spreading across the country. Over the next year, states will be required to start checking the eligibility again of every person who is on Medicaid. People will have to fill out forms to verify their personal information, including address, income, and household size. So what would you do if you lose your coverage? That will vary depending on which state you live in. Some states are moving faster than others to check eligibility. Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Idaho, Iowa, New Hampshire, Ohio, Oklahoma, and West Virginia are among the states that will begin removing ineligible Medicaid recipients as early as April. Other states will start taking that step in May, June, or July. Not everyone will be removed from the program all at once. States plan to verify all recipients' eligibility over periods of 9 months to 1 year. And then how will you be notified if you're losing coverage? Well, if you rely on Medicaid for care, it's important to update your contact information, including home address, phone number, and email, with the state from which you receive benefits. States will mail a renewal form to your home. The federal government also requires states to contact you in another way, by phone, text message, or email, to remind you to fill out the form. And what are your options if you're kicked off? Many people who no longer qualify for Medicaid coverage can turn to the ACA marketplace for coverage, where they'll find healthcare coverage options that may cost less than $10 a month. But the coverage available on the marketplace will still be vastly different from what's offered through Medicaid. Out-of-pocket expenses and copays are often higher. Also, people will need to check if the insurance plans offered through the marketplace will still cover their doctors. A special enrollment period will open for people who are unenrolled from Medicaid that will start on March 31st and last through July 31st of 2024. People who lose Medicaid coverage will have up to 60 days to enroll after losing coverage, according to the guidance of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services that was sent to states last month. Alexander of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Lawmakers in several Democratic-controlled states are advocating sweeping voter protections this year, reacting to what they view as a broad undermining of voting rights by the Supreme Court and Republican-led states, as well as a failed effort in Congress to bolster access to the polls. Legislators in Connecticut, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, and New Mexico have introduced voting rights measures, while Michigan's Secretary of State is preparing a plan. Among other things, the proposals would require state approval for local governments to change redistricting or voting procedures, ban voter suppression and intimidation, mandate that ballots are printed in more languages, increase protections for voters with disabilities, ensure the right to vote for those with previous felony convictions, and instruct judges to prioritize voter access when hearing election-related challenges. The measures are taking a much wider approach than legislation targeting a single aspect of voting or election laws. They seek to implement, on a statewide basis, many of the protections under the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, a law that many Democrats and voting rights groups say is being stripped of its most important elements. Well, it's not just us, and it is a fact. If the legislation is enacted, the states would join California, New York, Oregon, Washington, and Virginia in having comprehensive voting rights laws. Will Oramus of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Twitter and Tesla chief Elon Musk defended Scott Adams, the under fire creator of Dilbert, in a series of tweets yesterday, Sunday, blasting media organizations for dropping his comic strip after Adams said that white people should get the hell away from black people. Replying to tweets about the controversy, Musk said it is actually the media that is racist against whites and Asians. And I have to tell you, as being Asian adjacent, stop grouping Asians in your bigotry, please. He offered no criticism of Adams' comments, in which the cartoonist called black people a hate group and said, "I don't want to have anything to do with them." Musk previously tweeted, then later deleted, a reply to Adams' tweet about media outlets pulling his comic strips, in which Musk asked, "What exactly are they complaining about?" The billionaire's comments continue a pattern of Musk expressing more concern about the free speech of people who make racist or anti-Semitic comments than about the comments themselves. Musk's views on race have been the subject of scrutiny both at Twitter, where he has reinstated far-right accounts, including those of neo-Nazis and others previously banned for hate speech, and at Tesla, which has been the subject of multiple lawsuits alleging a culture of rampant racism and sexual harassment in the workplace. In the wake of Musk's latest tweets, the president of the civil rights group Color of Change told the Washington Post that he is reiterating his call for advertisers to boycott Twitter. And well, they should. All right, let us go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, A Tale of Two Marvels. First, the tagline for 1978's Superman was, "You'll believe a man can fly." And it took a crew of special effects people doing blue screen compositing, front projection, rigs and wires, and even a specially designed dual-focusing camera process that allowed them to zoom into Christopher Reeve while zooming out simultaneously from his background to make it seem like he was flying towards you. It looked great in '78, and the film won a Special Achievement Academy Award for special effects. 45 years later, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania makes that film magic seem like shadow puppets. Read Anthony Bresnikan's Vanity Fair article about how these people conceived the quantum world. Production designer Will Hittay basically said, "Whatever we can imagine, we will make happen." And I cannot stress how amazing the design of this film is. It's insane, the seamless blend of CGI, models, wacky sets, and the work of half a dozen special effects companies, all bringing you a gangbang love child of Star Wars, Dune, and Flash Gordon, pumped full of steroids and LSD, and exploded on PIM growth particles onto the big screen. Second, I just rewatched 2021's Eternals, and I still like it, but it left me uneasy. In Eternals, our heroes chose Earth while dooming planets of unseen and unknowable beings to non-existence. In Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, our immediate familial and social relations are worth the suffering and death of distant billions. If our failures to address our ongoing climate apocalypse and the global pandemic show us anything, it's that these priorities are certainly human, or maybe just certainly American. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania does the same thing, and again, I remained entertained and uneasy. While that moral framework may make us heroes to the loved ones we've saved, what does it make us to those we have chosen not to? This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi. Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Stuff happens, right? I mean, who could have thought that in these modern times of digital monitoring of everything, something as massive as a freight train could become a toxic fireball rolling undetected and unslowed into an Ohio town? But a Norfolk Southern train did just that, derailing in East Palestine and contaminating the air, water, land, and families with tons of cancer-causing chemicals. Gosh, exclaimed Norfolk Southern. Gosh, exclaimed the Ohio governor. Gosh, exclaimed the U.S. Transportation Chief. Gosh, exclaimed the GOP chair of the Rail Transportation Committee. This is a terrible, unexpected accident, and we're all appalled by it. Only, all of these officials knew full well that this disaster would happen, though they didn't know exactly where. Indeed, far from unexpected, there are more than 1,000 preventable train derailments in the U.S. every year. Norfolk Southern had another one only days after the one in Ohio. And these things don't just happen. They are caused by the profiteering greed of the monopolistic industry's top executives and rich investors. While Norfolk's boardroom elites have been pocketing record profits in recent years, they've used armies of lobbyists and multi-million-dollar political donations to kill safety protections that would prevent such a disastrous record. To cut costs and jack up profits, railroad bosses have rigged the rules to run trains that are absurdly long, go too fast, carry undisclosed toxics in weak tanker cars, have no fire detectors, use outmoded braking systems, and have as few as one crew member on board. One. This is Jim Hightower saying Norfolk's derailed train was made to derail. It pulled 149 cars stretching nearly 2 miles down the track, and it was ill-equipped to detect fires and other problems. This disaster was not an accident. It was mandated by the corporate and government officials now professing outrage.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that 27 Japanese women working in the Seattle public school system handed in their forced resignations. In the aftermath of the attacks on Pearl Harbor, anti-Japanese hysteria swept the United States, especially the West Coast. 127,000 people of Japanese ancestry were sent to live in 10 internment camps by executive order of President Roosevelt. Many of these U.S. citizens sold their homes and businesses, often for a fraction of their value, before they were forced to move. In Seattle, mothers from Gatewood Elementary School circulated a petition for the removal of Japanese office employees from the schools. The school district pressured the women to resign. Even James Sakamoto, the editor of the Japanese American Courier, encouraged the women to voluntarily leave their jobs. He met with the women at the newspaper's office and told them they should resign before they were fired. Faced with such pressure, the women wrote a resignation letter. They wrote, "Most of us have received our education in local schools and have been proud of the fact, as we have been proud of our positions as employees." Word of the resignations quickly became headline news in local newspapers. Several protests were held in support of the women. Students at the University of Washington circulated a petition on their behalf. They gathered more than 1,000 signatures, declaring the treatment of these office workers undemocratic, intolerant, disrespectful of the rights of American citizens. In 1986, the governor of Washington signed into law an admission of wrongdoing toward these women and payment of reparations for their forced resignations. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 31 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high, they say, of about 44. We do have snow showers at the moment and have had them for, well, several hours this morning. Looks like we will be moving into showers and a few thunderstorms later on this morning and afternoon. And it looks like we're going to get, well, we've already had about 2 inches of snow, and they're saying that we're going to get about a quarter inch of rain, and then rain and snow this evening, becoming all snow overnight. Lows in the upper 20s. Winds out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and it looks like we're going to get about 1 to 3 inches of snow overnight, and then rain and snow in the morning. Will become intermittent in the afternoon, with highs in the upper 30s, winds out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and about an inch or two expected of snow tomorrow. Pollen is still rated as none here in the little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 39 parts per million, and that daytime UV index has it has now been raised to the moderate range at level 3. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.65 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 46 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 44 and sunny. Rome is 55 degrees with showers in the vicinity. Kyiv is 33 and cloudy. Kabul is 43 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 61 and fair. Tokyo is 45 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 71 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees with rain and wind and a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Hundreds of protesters in Tunisia's capital took to the streets on Saturday to denounce racism and express solidarity towards migrants after the country's increasingly authoritarian leader claimed there's a plot to erase his country's identity by bringing in sub-Saharan Africans. People shouting no to racism, solidarity with migrants, and no to police crackdowns marched through central Tunis as part of the demonstration staged by Tunisia's Journalists Union and several non-governmental organizations. President Kais Saied said earlier this week that urgent measures were needed to address the entry of irregular immigrants from sub-Saharan countries with their lot of violence, crimes, and unacceptable practices. The spokesperson for the Tunisian Forum for Social and Economic Rights deplored an increasing number of racist assaults against sub-Saharan migrants following Said's remarks. We noted attempts to drive some migrants out of their homes, he told the AP. Others are being prevented from taking public transportation. Tunisian comedian Fatma Saidane denounced deplorable actions targeting some sub-Saharan people and called on people to show a civic-minded attitude. We must not assault or insult people who live on our soil. In the same way, we don't accept our compatriots to be ill-treated in Europe, she said. In recent days, about 100 sub-Saharan migrants have been detained for having illegally crossed the Tunisian border. Other migrants enter the country from neighboring Libya. Said's comments raised a storm on social media and condemnation from NGOs. Tunisia, once lauded as the only budding democracy in the Arab world, has recently also seen a crackdown on opposition politicians and activists.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Tens of thousands of Israelis on Saturday protested their far-right government's plans to overhaul the legal system 3 days after Parliament advanced a bill that would enable lawmakers to overturn a Supreme Court decision with a simple majority. The Supreme Court override bill's approval in a parliamentary vote in the Knesset was the latest step by Netanyahu's ruling coalition toward realizing the judicial overhaul that is steaming ahead, despite calls for dialogue and consensus from American Jews and Israel's president and the weekly mass protests. In addition to weakening the country's highest court, the protesters say the proposed changes threatens Israel's democratic values and concentrates power with the ruling coalition in parliament. Netanyahu and his ruling coalition believe the court has had unchecked power for years, since the beginning of Israel. For 8 weeks, the weekly protests have gained momentum, with large sectors of Israeli society and businesses joining them. And on Saturday, the main protest took place in the central city of Tel Aviv, along with numerous smaller demonstrations across the country. The protesters held Israeli flags, flares, and posters with different messages against the judicial overhauls. "No constitution, no democracy," said one placard. Some demonstrators stood behind a banner reading, "They shall not pass," and "We shall override," referring to the vote. Well, good luck to the liberal tendencies in Israel against this right-wing takeover, not only in that country, but around the world. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. My sister has delayed her medical appointment till next week, so we'll pick up about that next week. But we will be here tomorrow, so do stay tuned all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.